Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Trevor Graves. Okay, before we get into this, though, we need to talk about keyloggers. So, keyloggers record keystrokes made by a user, and then that information is sent back to a third party. And criminals typically use them to steal personal information and access things like accounts. So there is two types. So there's a software keylogger, which is a computer program installed on your device hard drive, or there's a hardware keyloggers, things like a USB that are placed onto the external of a computer. So we're going to focus on hardware keyloggers. So there is multiple types. So there's one where it's placed in with the keyboard's connection cable, so it's placed between where the keyboard connects to the laptop or device. A less common one is a hidden camera. So in a public space, somebody would put a hidden camera that points down to a keyboard, and then they just watch the keystrokes. And then there's a more complicated one, which is going to be a USB disk-loaded keylogger. So that's a Trojan horse that delivers the malware, and then it's connected to your device. In this specific case, it was a physical keylogger that was used. It looked like this one in the picture, which basically just looks like a USB, and they typically only cost around $50, so that's why these are really popular. So what happened? So keyloggers were placed into the computers of University of Iowa professors. So they then used this information to log into ICON, which is the University of Iowa Courses Online. So this system has like grades, attendance, and upcoming tests. So what did he do? So he would take this information and then log into professors to change his grades. Then he changed his own grades over 90 times, and then he also changed the grades of at least 5 other students. And he would also download copies of exams and then share them with other students. So once it was kind of noticed that something was happening in ICON, a professor just noticed it and reported it to campus IT security officers, and then they started looking into it more, and in January they discovered that 250 HawkID or ICON accounts were compromised, and then campus police started an investigation, and then after a little bit, once the FBI heard about it, they started to get involved. So the investigation begins, and they did suspect it was Trevor Graves, so they got a search warrant for his off-campus apartment, and when they went in there, they found keyloggers, cell phones, flash drives, stolen exams, and on one of the cell phones was a picture of Trevor logged into a professor's account, and there's like a big file in the back that was titled as an exam. So who is Trevor Graves? So this is a picture of him. He was born on March 28th, 1995. He is originally from Fort Collins, Colorado. And then he came to the University of Iowa and wrestled, and he was a mechanical engineering major. So, did he do this alone? No. There was actually a search warrant for 2 other students' homes, and they confiscated some electronic devices, like phones that just had text messages between them and Trevor, but no charges were ever brought against them. So, the punishment of the accomplices. So, the University of Iowa came out and stated anyone discovered to have been involved in the scheme would be expelled or suspended. But they never really got enough evidence and didn't really focus on the accomplices as much as they did Trevor, so nobody else was charged. Text messages. So, this played a big role into how this whole scheme went down. So, he worked hand in hand with other students, and they would help each other out. So a student would be in class, you could see on the projector like that a professor just logged into ICON. So they would text Trevor and be like, hey, he just logged in, and then Trevor would get the information. So in their text messages, they didn't use the words keylogger, instead they used the word pineapple. So on the right you can see text messages between Trevor and another student. So, when did this all happen? So, he changed his grade over 90 times in a 20-month period. So, it was March 2015 to December 2016. And then he was arrested in November of 2017. He pled guilty in April of 2018. It wasn't actually sentenced until August 23rd of 2018. So, in the Iowa Code, section 715.4, it talks about prohibitions, transmission, and use of software. So it says, it is unlawful for a person who is not an owner or operator of a computer to transmit computer software to such computer knowingly or with conscious avoidance of actual knowledge, and to use such software to do any of the following. And then it gives a big long list, but we're going to focus on A, the use of a keystroke logging function that records keystrokes, made by an owner or operator of a computer and transfers that information from the computer to another person. And then it gives the penalties. So 1, a person who commits an unlawful act under this chapter is guilty of an aggravated misdemeanor, or a person who commits an unlawful act under this chapter and who causes pecuniary losses exceeding $1,000 to a victim of the unlawful act is guilty of a Class D felony. So what does that all mean? So it's saying that it is illegal to change any computer data or software on any computer that you don't personally own with the intent of personal benefit. And then keylogging is just one of the many ways that this can be done. So Trevor's actual trial. So he did end up pleading guilty. He pled guilty to transmission of a command to damage a protected computer. And then he did admit that from March 7th, 2015 to November 15th, 2016 was when he was manipulating the University of Iowa computers and using a keylogger. And his case was actually prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Iowa. And then on the right is kind of a little summary about the case and just some case paperwork. So who was affected? So obviously multiple professors were affected. But what's interesting is that it wasn't just from the engineering major, it was from multiple majors because he was kind of helping out his friends. So it was dozens of professors from business, engineering, chemistry, and there's a couple more smaller ones, but it also affected other students. So by changing these grades, it was affecting other students' grades because it could affect the curve that was happening in the class, which could have made other students who were actually trying their hardest, their grades worse, because by changing the grades to make them better, it was affecting the curve. So agencies involved. So it started out with the University of Iowa, just their IT division, and then it went to University of Iowa Public Safety, and then eventually went to the FBI and the Cyber Division as they realized how big of a problem this actually was. So punishment. Trevor received 2 years of supervised release, 4 months in jail, and then he had to pay $67,900 in restitution, and he actually had to pay another $100 to Crime Victims Fund. So how did the university respond to this? So they ran a bunch of updates all throughout the university computers, all the professors, library computers. So they took that restitution money to run all of those updates. And then, so that was improving like physical security on classroom computers, but they also created a 2-step login program. So this would make it harder if anybody ever did this again to actually be able to log in, because now in order to log in, a PIN number is sent to a mobile device, and then you have to type in that mobile device PIN into the login. So, was there any other cases at the university? So, Trevor was really the first big cybercrime case at the university. And then since they made all of these improvements, they have actually not seen any more cases like this one. But there have been similar cases. It talked about how Trevor was kind of inspired by a case in Colorado that was very similar, but the person who did it before him was not nearly as successful as he was. And then after his case, there was a case at BYU that was basically the exact same thing, but they were charged with a 3rd-degree felony. They were expelled, and one of the 2 people served jail time. And actually, this happened as well in a Californian high school called Corona del Mar. So a student was changing the grades, just like Trevor did, and the senior from the high school was actually arrested for it at the age of 17. So this just goes to show like how easy it is to access this device and use it. So it's important that we talk about prevention. So one of the things is using that multi-step login where you have to have the PIN to the mobile device. And then another one is updating software to help patch up the vulnerabilities in the computer systems. And then I read about key encryption, which basically makes it really hard for, if there is a keylogger, to actually figure out what is being typed. You can install anti-malware programs, and then it's also really important that we teach how to detect keyloggers. So there is a few ways to kind of detect them. So you can do Control-Alt-Delete on your laptop or computer, and it's going to open up a task manager, and you can see if there is a keylogger activated by just going through the tasks that are open and running. You can also go into settings and open programs and features, and this is going to show what has been installed on the computer, so you can look and see if something is a little suspicious, something you don't remember installing is on there. You can also run a full malware scan. This is going to be a little bit more complicated. You do have to find like a good and trustable program before you do this. And that is all I have, so here's all my sources. I think it's important that we learn from this case and just realize that this is something that's very simple to accomplish, as they're only $50 and they're pretty easy to use. So it's important that we learn from this case and just really focus on it and realize how easy this is to do, and we need to prevent it so this doesn't happen again.